After having put my last video on, just talking briefly about the problems with wet in wet and the issues that you can get with mixing two complementary colours lie opposite in a colour wheel. Somebody put a comment on and said, could you tell us a little bit more about the colour wheel? And I'm just going to do a very short video, but to be honest, I don't want people who are setting out on their artistic journey to get bogged down with too much colour theory. It's better just to learn about colour as you go along and by making mistakes. But the things that I think could be useful, there are whole books written on colour theory, so let's not go down that road. But just a few things that I think are useful. So if we look at the basic colour wheel here, in fact, I've sort of done one a little bit more detailed here, but let's just start off with the basic one. So as we all know, we have the three colours which are classed as primary colours, which no other two colours can make. And all the other colours that we have are made from those colours. So they're the primary colours, and I've labelled those P. And then, of course, when you mix two primaries together, you get what they call a secondary. So if you mix red and yellow, you will get orange. And they sit in between the colours. So between yellow and blue, you'll get green. And between blue and red, you'll get purple. So that's fairly straightforward. Now, what I was saying in my last video was it's really good to have a knowledge about what happens when you mix two complementary colours together. So say you were doing I think I mentioned this in the last video, that if you were going to do a spring picture of purple crocuses and yellow daffodils, if you mix those together, particularly with wet in wet, you will be very disappointed because you would get these greys. Basically, the outcome of that is that when you mix complementary colours together, so there's blue and orange, yellow and purple, red and green, you're going to get these greys, which is fantastic if you have that knowledge and that's what you want. So that's as far as I went in the last video. But somebody was also asking about tertiary colours. And it's not something that I have really worried about, but I have just looked into that a little bit. But before I move on to that, knowing your complementary colours is not only good for when you're doing wet in wet, it's also good for toning a colour down. So here, first of all, if you had a 50-50 mix of red and green, which are complementaries, you will get this browny grey. 50-50 mix of yellow and purple, and the same with that. So you get these browns or greys sometimes, dependent on exactly what shade of blue you're using and so on. But you get, and they call those a neutral. So it's good to know that. But as I just mentioned, it's good to actually tone a colour down. If you put a wee bit of the opposite colour in, so if you put a tiny bit of green into a red, you'll get more of a darker red here. If you put a tiny bit of purple into your yellow, you'll get a toned down yellow. If you put a little bit of orange into your blue, you get sort of like a navy blue. So that's good to know. And we can do it the other way around. So if we had a green with a little bit of red in, you'll get this more of an olive green. If you have purple with a little bit of yellow in, you'll get more of an aubergine colour. And if you have orange with a little bit of blue in, then you'll get more of a, I don't know, like a coffee colour. Looking at tertiaries, let me just turn this over so you can see that there. I've labelled this, and we have the primaries, so we have the red, the blue and the yellow. So when you mix those together, if you mix red and yellow, you will get an orange. When you mix a yellow and a blue together, you will get a green. And when you mix a blue and, where are we here, and a red, you will get a purple or a violet. Now these in between, so they call this a red violet, a red orange, and so on. So in between, so between the red, the primary red and the secondary orange, you have what they call an intermediary. And they call them red orange, red violet, yellow orange, yellow green, and blue violet. And in some books and on Google, they call those tertiaries colours, but they're not. I'm fairly certain I'm right, but if there's somebody out there who knows better than me, then please let me know. Primary colours you can't make. Secondary colours are two primary colours put together. And tertiary colours are two secondary colours together. And that's what I've done here. So I've got these lines here which tell you about the complementaries. But this triangle shows you the tertiaries. So that's a secondary, that's a secondary, that's a secondary. And if you mix these together, you will get a tertiary colour. But I've never actually gone through the process physically of actually mixing tertiary colours until today. And here we have the result of that. So if we're looking at this here, you've got the purple and you've got the orange, purple and orange. And this is what it makes. It makes like a burnt sienna colour, like a really rich brown. And then there's the orange and there's the green, which gives you another sort of brown. And then the green and the purple, which gives you more like an aubergine. So they're similar. They are similar to these, with slight differences. And beyond that, talking about harmonious colours and all of this sort of thing, I don't think you need to know that. I do think it's useful knowing about your complementaries and knowing your primaries and your secondaries. Tertiaries, I've only ever mixed those today and I've been painting for 30 odd years. But it is interesting to see. That's where I'd leave it. So that's just a little mini video in between my monthly arty tips. Hopefully the person who asked me about that helps a little bit. Whether you want to look at that in more depth, there are plenty of books out there. But in the meantime, as I always say, happy painting.